So I'm going to enter a contract in BidUnity. What's important here is that I have the counterparty to the contract, including a billing contact for that person. I really want to have all of the project participants' contact information, but as you'll see, that information is required. So I go to the terms page, and here I have a couple of different data points to put in. Originally scheduled start date, well, let me start with the date of execution. That's going to be basically the day that Doran Glass is signing. Originally scheduled start date is the day that we are expected to begin field performance. If we have originally scheduled end date, that's the day that our field performance is expected to conclude. I just spoke with the superintendent. They're, basically working on getting the structure on the first floor finished up. He sent me this photo and this photo to qualify where the project is going. And we're going to have 3 floors of glazing, so you can see we're some time away. So as of right now, our best expectation for starting is, we'll say March 3rd, and that's likely to change. For right now, I'm going to maintain the March 3rd as our expected starting date. This expected starting date, it can be edited at a later time. Originally scheduled end date, this is important because it gives us a duration for our field performance. The start date and end date, they give us, 5 days, 14 days, 21 days, whatever the period of time is between those dates. That's how much time we have to perform the work. I'm gonna set this thing up that we'll give it 3 weeks. I think we maybe can complete the job in 2 weeks if everything goes great. I'm gonna put 3 just so that we can set expectations about what's reasonable for everyone. The date the work actually started, we don't know when that's gonna be, so we're gonna leave it blank for now. Same with the actual completion. The contract status, so we sent a proposal. That's the same thing as a contract offer. If they sign our proposal and send it back, that's them accepting the offer. They sent us back their contract, and I signed it, so it's been accepted. The total value, the amount that we put in here, this comes from the accepted proposal. So that is this proposal that was accepted. That's the amount of it. It's nice that the amount pre-populates as data for us. What these guys did is they rounded the value of the contract, down to an even dollar amount. It's important that our contract value that we put in here matches the contract value. It doesn't have to match the proposal. The counterparty to the contract, so that's going to be Bar Builders. They haven't given us a unique project ID. The change orders are going to bill with the contract. Whatever selection we make here, BidUnity is not currently doing anything with it, but perhaps in the future it will. The billing terms, this is going to be monthly progress billing for the contract. The payment terms, it's going to be we get payment when they get payment. We have in the contract that our bills are due to them on the 25th of the month. Our contract shows that our billing is supposed to include all of the work completed through the 25th of the month. Retention on material and labor is 10%. This is the contractor's address that comes from selecting here. And then Sarah is listed as the billing contact. For the data entry portion, that's the first section. That's what is essentially important. And then if we scroll down the page, We have a couple of other dates that we can keep track of. It's just data that we're recording. Now, we don't, we're not really actively using this for much outside of administration, but it is nice to have so that we can look at longer term trends. Okay, we have a summary of the labor associated with the proposal. So the proposal total, it's based on 330 hours, it's $18,000, and the labor cost budget, 20% is a normal benchmark. This shows that we're at 17.9% of the contract price. That's not alarming, but it is nice to know. We're within about 2.1% of what a normal benchmark is. I think that our risk of the labor not being adequately captured in the contract price, that risk is 2.1%, maybe. When we look at the average labor burden rate, okay, by default, when this page loads, it populates at $23 an hour. Our labor rate currently, it's about $28.40. So as I type in the different rate here, if I go back to 23, you could see the number of hours is changing. Okay, our proposal intends to be accurate with respect to the dollar amount of the cost of labor. And the hours that BidUnity includes is not necessarily the correct number of hours. We're trying to get to an accurate labor cost, and we have to assume like the full value of a professional being productive 100% of the time. We're setting up labor at $61 an hour, but our proposal doesn't include driving to and from the job. It doesn't include, setting up in the morning, wrapping up for lunch, setting up after lunch. So it's a high rate, and it's for the time it takes to do the work. And all of the other stuff that must occur, that's not, that's other than actually doing the work, that stuff, it is going to have to happen. But we have 233 hours of field labor, and we have 467 hours, so it's almost double the time. And when you think about, setting up and wrapping up and driving to and from the job, it might be half of our actual time. So it's important that we update this, because this is used to determine how many labor hours we're actually likely to have on the project based on how much we expect to spend on labor. And this explains a little bit better about how this information is used and what we do. But we can look at the production obligation forecast, and this is going to show us basically for every single currently active contract. And currently active contracts are going to have the status offered, accepted, performed, discharged is not, excluded is not. Those are not included on the production forecast. So what I do every time before I sign a contract, I find out what is the current expectation for our performance to begin. In this case, it's early March, and we're going to try and wrap it up by about the 21st. And you could see right here, I have no current obligations for our crew. So we definitely expect to have plenty of manpower available. If the job fell in February, we'd have this other project to contend with. And if I click on this other project, you can kind of see we're looking at a current expected starting date. So we can revise this at any time. And this right here, this expected starting date is the date that controls where this appointment shows up on the calendar. I have the starting date per the contract schedule, the completion date per the contract schedule. That goes back to the originally scheduled start date and the originally scheduled end date. That gives me 32 days to perform the work, which is based on weekdays, it's 24 weekdays. Based on my shop labor, I'm expecting 6 days in the shop. This is a different project, but basically the way the numbers are crunched are the same. And then we have the project value, typical labor cost, total hours, average at that labor cost, total man days, field crew size. So the field crew size is based on, we're going to have 24 days and we're going to spend 20% of the contract price on labor. So we get 9 guys for that period of time. Shop crew size is the same kind of thing. It isn't necessarily an accurate reflection of how many people we have in the shop, but for the field, it's on average, I think it's pretty close. So when we are taking on a new contract obligation, we want to find out when is our counterparty expecting us to perform, and then we want to look at our current schedule of obligations to see how much manpower do we have available at that time. In the case of this contract, we have complete availability. So we definitely want to make sure that we get this obligation signed up. Now, I have to update this labor rate, to reflect our average labor burden cost, because that changes the number of hours, and that's going to be reflected on that schedule showing how much manpower we need at that time. So after I go through and update these fields, I'll go ahead and save the changes. And that brings me back to the project page. Now we have a contract, okay, we have these terms. We could open this up and take another look at it. But if I go to our contracts page, okay, this is going to show up in here. Okay, so this is the project. It's showing up, expecting to start, value, okay, and that's how you set up a contract. Now this contract is going to continue to appear on this list until the status changes to excluded or discharged. And a project becomes discharged when both parties fully perform the duties that they contracted to perform. So we do the job completely and we receive payment entirely. It becomes excluded, if a contract gets terminated or something happens to cancel the contract in the course of, then we might add an excluded, change the status to excluded. That would cause it to drop off of our work in progress list. But it's essential for us to log in contracts in this way, because we have a current complete list of all of the company's current obligations. That information absolutely has to be maintained in one place. Now, if I pull this up, you can see I have here an expected starting date. It's quite easy for us to come in here and change this date. What we do is, let's say we want it to start on the 4th. It's going to show that it starts on the 3rd, just because of the way that this saves the data with Greenwich Mean Time. But anyway, you could see how easy it is to change the starting date. Now, if we go back to our production plan and we wanted to carry this out to that March time frame, now you see this appears. It appears, on the 3rd, where we put in the date, and it has our field performance beginning on the 3rd. Okay, our shop performance necessarily has to begin before our field performance. In this case, this job, I think our field performance will need to start about 2 weeks ahead, but this isn't a detailed scheduling thing. It's just intended to reflect approximate manpower obligations months in advance, and in almost every single case, a project's scheduled starting time is going to change by some amount when it's more than a month into the future. So that's the process that we follow, the data that we are documenting, and then a little bit about how that data gets used. And the next step in this process is to set up the billing.